The bitter autumn wind carried Eleanor's tears as she hurried down the main street of Aspen, Colorado. October 1876 had been a particularly cruel month for the 30-year-old widow. Not because of the early frost that threatened the last of the harvests, but because of the whispers that followed her like shadows. "There goes the barren one," Meredith Crawley hissed to her friend as Eleanor passed the general store. They didn't bother lowering their voices anymore. 5 years with Samuel, and not a single child to show for it. Even after he died, she couldn't find another man willing to waste his seed on such infertile ground. Eleanor quickened her pace, clutching her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her late husband Samuel had been patient about their lack of children, always insisting that God has his own timing. But when consumption took him 2 years ago, Eleanor discovered that the townsfolk were far less forgiving of her empty cradle than he had been. She turned the corner toward her small rented room above the milliner's shop, nearly colliding with Olivia Larson, who was balancing a basket of mending on her hip. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Eleanor said, steadying the younger woman. Olivia's eyes softened. At 26, she was one of the few women in Aspen who didn't treat Eleanor like she carried some contagious disease. "It's nothing. Are you all right? You look like you've been crying." Eleanor wiped hastily at her cheeks. "Just the wind making my eyes water." Was it Meredith again? "That woman has a tongue sharper than my sewing scissors." "It doesn't matter. I'm used to it by now." "You shouldn't have to be," Olivia said firmly. "Being childless doesn't make you less of a woman." Eleanor gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you, but I should go, Mrs. Hargrove is expecting this fabric for her new hat." She held up the small parcel in her hand. As Eleanor continued toward the milliner's shop, she heard the unmistakable sound of horses approaching. A group of riders was coming into town, dust rising behind them. The lead rider caught her attention immediately, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who belonged in the saddle. Eleanor stepped aside to let the riders pass, but to her surprise, the lead rider slowed his horse beside her. He tipped his hat, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that reminded her of distant thunder. "Might you point me to where I could find Sheriff Miller?" "The sheriff's office is just past the bank on the left side of the street," Eleanor replied, trying not to stare at the stranger's strong jawline, now covered with several days' worth of stubble. "Much obliged." He nodded, then hesitated. "Are you all right, madam? If you don't mind my saying, you look troubled." The unexpected kindness in his question almost undid her composure. "I'm fine, thank you. Just a difficult day." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded again. "Name's Yates Irving. Just bought the old Thornton ranch outside of town. If you ever need anything." He let the offer hang in the air between them. "Eleanor Winters," she replied, surprised by her own willingness to introduce herself. "Welcome to Aspen, Mr. Irving." He smiled then, a slow, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "Call me Yates, madam. Everyone does." With that, he tipped his hat again and continued down the street, his companions following behind him. Eleanor watched him go, a strange flutter in her chest that she hadn't felt since Samuel was alive. That evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed in her small rented room, she found herself thinking about the cowboy with the kind eyes. Yates Irving. The name rolled around in her mind like a smooth river stone. She shook her head at her own foolishness. A man like that wouldn't look twice at a childless widow whose worth in the community had been measured and found wanting. Morning came with the clanging of the church bell. Sunday service meant Eleanor would have to face the entire town at once, something she usually dreaded. She dressed in her best dress, faded blue calico with lace at the collar that she'd mended so many times the original pattern was barely visible, and pinned her dark hair up in a simple bun. As she slipped into a pew at the back of the church, she noticed several heads turn in her direction, followed by the inevitable whispers. She fixed her eyes straight ahead, determined to ignore them. Then she saw him, Yates Irving, sitting 3 rows ahead, his broad shoulders easily recognizable even from behind. Reverend Thompson began the service with his usual fervor, his sermon focusing on the story of Hannah from the Bible, a barren woman who prayed for a child. Eleanor felt the weight of eyes on her, knew that many in the congregation were making the connection. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. When the service ended, she rose quickly, hoping to escape before anyone could corner her with their false sympathy or thinly veiled judgment. She was nearly to the door when a hand touched her elbow. "Mrs. Winters," Yates said, his deep voice causing several nearby parishioners to pause in their conversations. "I was hoping to speak with you." Eleanor could feel the curious stares. "Of course, Mr. Irving." They stepped outside into the bright October sunlight. Fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet as they moved away from the church entrance. "I spoke with Sheriff Miller yesterday," Yates began. "He mentioned you're skilled with a needle." "I do some sewing, yes," Eleanor admitted, wondering where this was leading. "I find myself in need of someone to help get the ranch house in order. Curtains need mending, some clothes need patching, and frankly, I don't know the first thing about making a place habitable." He removed his hat, running a hand through his thick chestnut hair. "I'd be willing to pay fair wages for your help." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You want to hire me, if you're interested. The place is a bit of a ride from town, about 5 miles out, but I could arrange transportation." The offer was unexpected but welcome. Eleanor's work at the milliner's shop barely covered her room and food. Extra money would help her save toward her dream of someday opening her own seamstress shop. "I would be interested, Mr. Irving. When would you like me to start?" "Would tomorrow be too soon?" "I could have my ranch hand, Luke, bring the wagon to fetch you around 8 in the morning. Tomorrow would be fine." Eleanor couldn't help but notice Meredith Crawley watching their exchange with undisguised interest. No doubt the rumor mill would be churning by supper time. "Excellent." Yates replaced his hat. "I appreciate your help, Mrs. Winters." As he walked away, Eleanor caught Meredith whispering to another woman, their eyes fixed on her. She lifted her chin and walked in the opposite direction, a small smile playing at her lips. For once, the whispers didn't sting quite so badly. The following morning, Eleanor was ready well before 8, a basket containing her sewing supplies packed and waiting. She wore her work dress, a practical brown garment with a collar high enough to be respectable, but not so restrictive that she couldn't move freely. Her landlady, Mrs. Hargrove, eyed her suspiciously as she came downstairs. "Heard you're going out to the Irving ranch today," the older woman said, hands on her ample hips. "Mr. Irving has hired me to do some sewing for him," Eleanor explained, keeping her tone neutral. "HMPH, just be careful, girl. A single man living out there all alone. People will talk." "People already talk, Mrs. Hargrove," Eleanor replied quietly. "I doubt this will make much difference." A wagon pulled up outside, and Eleanor recognized the young man driving it as one of the riders who had accompanied Yates into town. She said goodbye to Mrs. Hargrove and stepped outside. "Morning, madam," the young man said, tipping his hat. "Name's Luke Dawson. Mr. Irving sent me to fetch you." "Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I appreciate the ride." As they left town, Eleanor felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The crisp autumn air and the sight of the mountains in the distance gave her a sense of freedom she rarely experienced within Aspen's confines. The wagon bumped along the dirt road, following the winding path that led away from town and into the rolling foothills. "Mr. Irving bought this place sight unseen," Luke explained as they rode. "Previous owner died with no kin, and the bank was eager to sell. Been abandoned for almost a year when we arrived last week. Place needs a woman's touch, something fierce." "How many of you are working at the ranch?" Eleanor asked, curious about her new employer's operation. "Just 5 of us for now. Mr. Irving, me, and 3 other hands, Miguel, Charlie, and Joseph. Boss says he'll hire more come spring when he expands the herd." They crested a small hill, and Eleanor caught her first glimpse of the Irving ranch. A 2-story house stood at the center of the property, weathered but solid-looking, with a broad porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings were scattered nearby: a barn, a bunkhouse, what looked like a storage shed. A corral held several horses, and in the distance, a small herd of cattle grazed on the autumn grass. "It's lovely," Eleanor said, genuinely impressed by the setting. "It will be once we get it fixed up proper," Luke agreed, guiding the wagon toward the main house. Yates was waiting on the porch as they arrived, dressed in a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal powerful forearms. He came down the steps to help Eleanor from the wagon. "Mrs. Winters, thank you for coming," he said, offering his hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her fingers. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Irving," she replied, suddenly aware of how blue his eyes were in the morning light. "Come inside and I'll show you what needs attention first." The interior of the ranch house was spacious but Spartan. A large main room served as both sitting area and dining space, with a massive stone fireplace along one wall. The furniture was minimal: a worn sofa, a dining table with 6 chairs, a sideboard that had seen better days. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung from the ceiling beams. "I apologize for the state of things," Yates said, looking somewhat embarrassed. "The previous owner wasn't much for housekeeping, it seems." "It's nothing that can't be fixed," Eleanor assured him, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. He showed her the rest of the house: a kitchen with a cast iron stove, a small study filled with books, and upstairs 4 bedrooms, only one of which appeared to be in use. "This is where I sleep," Yates explained, gesturing to the master bedroom where a large 4-poster bed dominated the space. "The curtains in here are the worst of the lot. Moths got to them, something fierce." Eleanor examined the heavy drapes, which indeed were riddled with holes. "These will need to be replaced entirely. I could make new ones if you have fabric." "Whatever you think best. I trust your judgment." They returned downstairs, and Yates showed her to a small sewing room off the main living area. The previous owner's wife must have used this space. "I thought you might be comfortable working in here." The room contained a sturdy table, a rocking chair, and an old treadle sewing machine that, despite its age, appeared to be in good working order. Eleanor ran her fingers over it reverently. She'd always used her own needles and thread, unable to afford such a luxury. "This is perfect," she said softly. "Good." Yates nodded, seeming pleased by her reaction. "I've asked Luke to ride into town tomorrow for supplies. If you make a list of what fabrics and such you'll need, he can fetch them." "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with something Eleanor couldn't quite name. Then Yates cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to it then. If you need anything, I'll be out in the barn most of the morning. We've a mare about to foal." After he left, Eleanor took a deep breath and looked around the room that would be her workspace. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of something like hope. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Every morning except Sundays, Luke would arrive with the wagon to bring Eleanor to the ranch, and every evening he would drive her back to town. Her days were filled with measuring, cutting, and sewing new curtains for each room, mending clothes for Yates and his ranch hands, patching quilts and tablecloths. As October gave way to November, Eleanor found herself looking forward to these days away from town, away from the whispers and judgment. At the ranch, she was valued for her skills, her opinions sought and respected. Yates often asked her advice on how to arrange furniture, or which colors might look best in different rooms. The ranch hands treated her with a courtesy that many townspeople had forgotten to show her. And then there was Yates himself. Eleanor found her thoughts drifting to him with increasing frequency, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. How he always thanked her for even the smallest tasks, the gentle way he handled the new foal when it finally arrived. She tried to remind herself that he was her employer, nothing more, but her heart seemed unwilling to listen to reason. One particularly cold November morning, Eleanor arrived at the ranch to find Yates waiting on the porch with 2 steaming cups. "Coffee," he offered, handing her one. "Thought you might need it to warm up, getting colder by the day." "Thank you," she said, wrapping her gloved hands around the mug gratefully. "Winter's coming early this year, I think. Seems that way." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside, I wanted to show you something." In the main room, Eleanor was surprised to find new furniture had replaced the worn pieces that had been there before. A plush sofa now sat before the fireplace, flanked by 2 comfortable-looking armchairs. New rugs covered the wooden floors, and the dining table had been polished to a high shine. "Mr. Irving, this is wonderful," she exclaimed. "When did all this arrive?" "Yesterday afternoon. Ordered it from Denver weeks ago, but the train was delayed." He watched her reaction carefully. "Do you think it suits the house?" "It's perfect." Eleanor ran her hand over the soft upholstery of one armchair. "The color complements the curtains beautifully." "I was hoping you'd say that." He looked pleased. "I chose it with your blue curtains in mind." The idea that he had considered her work while selecting furniture warmed Eleanor more than the coffee. "You have good taste, Mr. Irving." "Yates," he corrected gently. "After all these weeks, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" "Yates," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. "And you should call me Eleanor." "Eleanor," he said, his voice softening on the syllables. "That's a beautiful name." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Eleanor became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from his tall frame. The moment was interrupted by Luke bursting through the door, his face flushed with cold and excitement. "Boss, that new bull broke through the south fence. Miguel and Charlie are trying to head him off before he gets too far." Yates sighed. "Duty calls. Will you be all right here on your own, Eleanor? I might be gone a few hours. Of course, I have plenty to keep me busy." As the men hurried out, Eleanor settled into her sewing room but found it hard to concentrate. Her thoughts kept returning to the way Yates had said her name, the look in his eyes when he'd shown her the new furniture. She was being foolish, she knew. A successful rancher like Yates Irving would want a young bride who could give him children, not a barren widow 5 years his senior. The day grew colder as clouds gathered overhead. By early afternoon, snow began to fall, light flurries at first, then heavier, driven by an increasingly strong wind. Eleanor watched with growing concern from the window of her sewing room. If the storm worsened, the road back to town might become impassable. Just as she was considering what to do, the front door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and snow. Yates stamped his boots on the threshold, his coat and hat covered in white. "That bull gave us quite a chase," he said, hanging his wet things by the door. "Got him back in the corral, though." His voice trailed off as he noticed her worried expression. "What is it?" Eleanor gestured toward the window. The snow, it's getting worse. Yates moved to stand beside her, frowning at the thickening white curtain outside. You're right, it's coming down harder than I expected. He turned to her, concern evident in his eyes. I don't think it's safe for you to travel back to town tonight. Eleanor felt a flutter of panic. But I can't stay here. People will talk. People already talk, he said, echoing her own words to Mrs. Hargrove. Your safety matters more than gossip. She knew he was right, but the thought of the rumors that would spread if she spent the night at the ranch made her stomach knot with anxiety. What would you suggest? Stay here in one of the spare bedrooms. I'll have Miguel's wife, Rosa, come up from their cabin to chaperone. She helps with the cooking anyway. He placed a reassuring hand on her arm. No one can fault your propriety with Rosa in the house. The solution was sensible, and Eleanor found herself nodding in agreement. Thank you, that's very considerate. It's settled then. I'll go fetch Rosa while you make yourself comfortable. After Yates left, Eleanor stood by the window watching the snow transform the landscape into a white wonderland. She was startled from her reverie by the sound of footsteps on the porch. Expecting Yates and Rosa, she was surprised when the door opened to reveal Olivia Larson, her face flushed from the cold. Olivia, what are you doing here? Eleanor exclaimed, hurrying to help her friend with her snow-covered coat. I was at the Hendersons' farm delivering a baby when the storm hit, Olivia explained. She worked as a midwife in and around Aspen. Mr. Irving found me trying to make my way back to town and insisted I come here instead. Said you were stranded as well. Yes, the roads are becoming treacherous, Eleanor confirmed, relieved to see a friendly face. He's gone to fetch his ranch hand's wife to stay with us. Always the gentleman, isn't he? Olivia remarked with a knowing smile. He asked about you, you know. What, when? A few weeks ago in town. Wanted to know if you were well respected, if you had family nearby. Olivia's eyes twinkled. I think he's sweet on you, Eleanor. Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor scoffed, though her heart quickened at the thought. He's my employer, nothing more, if you say so. Olivia didn't look convinced. But I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching. Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened again, admitting Yates and a small, dark-haired woman bundled against the cold. Mrs. Larson, good to see you made it safely, Yates said, helping the woman beside him remove her heavy shawl. This is Rosa Diaz, Miguel's wife. Rosa, this is Mrs. Winters and Mrs. Larson. Rosa smiled warmly at them. Pleased to meet you, ladies. Mr. Irving says you'll be staying the night. I'll make sure you're comfortable. Thank you, Rosa, Eleanor replied, grateful for the woman's friendly demeanor. I've asked Rosa to prepare supper for us, Yates explained. And I've sent word to the bunkhouse that we have guests so the men will keep their distance. Your reputations are safe. Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. Even in a crisis, he considered her standing in the community. As the evening progressed, Eleanor found herself enjoying the unexpected company. Rosa proved to be an excellent cook, serving a hearty stew with fresh biscuits that warmed them all against the cold night. After dinner, they gathered in the sitting room, where Yates stoked the fire to a cheerful blaze. The storm shows no sign of letting up, he observed, glancing out the window at the swirling snow. You ladies might be here for a day or two. I hope Mrs. Hargrove doesn't worry, Eleanor said, thinking of her landlady's reaction when she failed to return. I sent Luke to town before the worst of the storm hit, Yates assured her. He'll let folks know you're both safe here. The conversation flowed easily as the evening wore on. Olivia shared stories of the babies she had delivered, while Rosa spoke of her childhood in Mexico and how she had met Miguel when he was working on a ranch near the border. Yates, Eleanor discovered, had grown up in Missouri, the son of a horse trader who had taught him everything he knew about livestock. "What brought you to Colorado?" she asked him, curious about the path that had led him to Aspen. "The war changed everything," he said, a shadow crossing his face. "I served with the Union cavalry. Afterward, Missouri didn't feel like home anymore. Too many memories." He stared into the fire for a moment. "I drifted west, worked on ranches in Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, saved every penny until I had enough to buy my own place." "And you chose Aspen," Eleanor prompted when he fell silent. His eyes met hers across the room. "Something told me this was where I needed to be." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Rosa and Olivia exchanged a glance, a silent communication that Eleanor pretended not to notice. Later, as the women prepared for bed in the upstairs bedrooms, Olivia cornered Eleanor in the hallway. "You're blind if you can't see it," she whispered. "That man is in love with you." "Don't be absurd," Eleanor protested, though her pulse quickened at the thought. "He's kind to everyone." "Not like he is with you." Olivia squeezed her friend's hand. "Don't let what those gossips in town say make you miss out on happiness, Eleanor. You deserve love as much as anyone." After Olivia retired to her room, Eleanor stood by the window, watching the snow continue to fall in the moonlight. Could Olivia be right? Did Yates have feelings for her? And even if he did, could she allow herself to hope for a future when she couldn't give him the children a man in his position would surely want? The storm raged for 2 days, during which time Eleanor, Olivia, and Rosa turned the ranch house into a warm haven against the winter cold. They baked bread, mended clothes, and completed the last of the curtains Eleanor had been working on. In the evenings, Yates joined them by the fire, reading aloud from one of his many books or simply talking late into the night. On the morning of the third day, Eleanor awoke to sunshine streaming through her window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine white landscape that glittered in the light. After breakfast, Yates announced that the roads should be clear enough for travel by midday. "Luke will take you ladies back to town after lunch," he told them. "I'm sure you're eager to return to your homes." "Thank you for your hospitality," Olivia said warmly. "You turned what could have been a dangerous situation into a pleasant visit." "It was my pleasure," Yates replied, though his eyes lingered on Eleanor. After Olivia and Rosa left the room, Eleanor found herself alone with Yates for the first time since the storm began. "I wanted to thank you as well," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "You've been very kind." "It was nothing," he insisted. "I'm just glad you were safe here." He hesitated, then added, "I'll miss having you around the house every day. It's felt more like a home with you in it." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache with longing. "I've enjoyed my time here too." "Eleanor," he began, taking a step closer to her. I was wondering if he was interrupted by Luke bursting into the room, his young face flushed with excitement. "Boss, that mare's foaling again. Looks like twins this time," Yates sighed, visibly frustrated by the interruption. "I'll be right there." As Luke hurried back out, he turned to Eleanor. "I'm sorry. Ranch life never allows for perfect timing. It's all right. Go tend to your horse." He nodded, then surprised her by taking her hand and pressing a quick kiss to her knuckles. "We'll finish this conversation soon." True to his word, Luke had the wagon ready after lunch. Eleanor and Olivia bundled up for the cold journey back to Aspen, saying their goodbyes to Rosa and the ranch hands who had kept them supplied with firewood throughout the storm. Yates helped Eleanor into the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I'll come into town tomorrow," he said quietly. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." The ride back to Aspen was cold but peaceful, the snow-covered landscape pristine and beautiful. Eleanor's mind was filled with thoughts of Yates, his gentle hands, his kind eyes, the way he'd kissed her hand that morning. She barely noticed when they entered town until the whispers began. "Well, look who's finally returned," came Meredith Crawley's sharp voice as the wagon rolled past the general store. 3 days at the Irving ranch. I wonder what services she was providing. Eleanor felt her face burn with humiliation as other townspeople stopped to stare. Beside her, Olivia bristled with indignation. "Ignore them," she whispered fiercely. "They're just jealous because a handsome, prosperous man values you while their own husbands can barely tolerate them." But the whispers followed them down the street, growing in volume and viciousness. By the time Luke dropped Eleanor at the milliner's shop, she was fighting back tears. Mrs. Hargrove was waiting at the door, her face pinched with disapproval. 3 days, Eleanor. 3 days with that man, unchaperoned. Mrs. Diaz was there, Eleanor protested. And Olivia as well. Nothing improper happened. That's not what they're saying in town. Mrs. Hargrove folded her arms across her ample chest. I run a respectable establishment. I can't have my tenants causing scandals. Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. What are you saying? I'm saying you have until the end of the week to find other accommodations. I'm sorry, Eleanor, but I have my reputation to think of. The injustice of it stung like a physical blow. Where am I supposed to go? You know there's nowhere else in town that will rent to a single woman. Mrs. Hargrove's expression softened slightly. Perhaps you could stay with a friend until this blows over. But Eleanor knew she had few friends in Aspen willing to defy public opinion. As she climbed the stairs to her small room, she felt a crushing weight of despair. In 3 days, her life had gone from hopeful to desperate. Even if Yates did care for her as Olivia suggested, would he still want her when he learned how quickly the town had turned against her? The following morning brought snow flurries and a pounding on her door. Eleanor opened it to find Reverend Thompson standing there, his thin face set in stern lines. "Mrs. Winters, I feel it's my duty as your spiritual guide to speak with you about the rumors circulating through town." Eleanor sighed, stepping back to allow him entry. "Please come in, Reverend." He perched on the edge of her single chair while she sat on the bed. "Eleanor, I've known you since you came to Aspen as Samuel's bride. You've always been a woman of virtue despite your unfortunate inability to fulfill your womanly duty." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That's why I'm so distressed by these stories about you and Mr. Irving." "Nothing happened, Reverend," Eleanor said firmly. "I was trapped by the storm, as was Mrs. Larson. Mrs. Diaz was present the entire time as a chaperone." "I believe you," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But perception is often more powerful than reality. The Women's Auxiliary has expressed concerns about your continued involvement with the church choir. The blow was unexpected. The choir was one of Eleanor's few joys in life. "Are you asking me to step down, temporarily?" he hastened to add. "Just until this dies down." One by one, the pillars of Eleanor's life were crumbling. By noon, she had lost her position at the milliner's shop as well, Mrs. Hargrove claiming she couldn't afford to lose customers who refused to patronize a business employing a woman of questionable character. Eleanor spent the afternoon in her room, packing her meager belongings and wondering where she would go. Olivia had offered her a place to stay, but as the town midwife, she couldn't risk her own reputation. Perhaps there was work in the next town over, though traveling alone in winter was dangerous. A knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it, half expecting another bearer of bad news, but instead found Yates standing there, his hat in his hands. "May I come in?" he asked, his expression grave. "It's not proper," she said automatically, then laughed bitterly. though I suppose my reputation is already in tatters. I've heard, he said grimly, stepping into the small room. Olivia told me what's happening. I'm so sorry, Eleanor, this is my fault. No, she said firmly, it's this town's fault. They've been looking for a reason to cast me out since Samuel died. Yates paced the small space, his tall frame seeming too large for the confines of her room. It's not right, you've done nothing wrong. Right or wrong doesn't matter. I've lost my room, my job, even my place in the church choir. Eleanor sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yates stopped pacing and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Come to the ranch, he said, his blue eyes intense. Not as an employee, as my wife. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. Your wife. It's not how I planned to ask you, he admitted, a rueful smile crossing his face. I had a whole speech prepared, but yes, Eleanor, I'm asking you to marry me. But why? You barely know me. I know enough. His grip on her hands tightened. I know you're kind and skilled and stronger than you realize. I know my house feels like a home when you're in it. I know I think about you constantly when you're not there. Eleanor's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. Yates, I can't give you children. You know what they call me in town. I don't care what they call you, he said fiercely. I've never cared about having children. What I care about is you. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. You are plenty for me, Eleanor, more than enough. Tears filled her eyes at his words. Do you really mean that? With all my heart. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. Marry me, today, if you're willing. I've already spoken to the justice of the peace. Today, Eleanor's eyes widened. But what will people think? Let them think what they will. We'll be too busy building our life together to care. The certainty in his voice, the love shining in his eyes, gave Eleanor the courage she needed. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. They were wed that afternoon in the Justice of the Peace's office, with Olivia and Luke as witnesses. Eleanor wore her best dress, the faded blue calico, while Yates had donned a clean shirt and his least worn pair of trousers. The ceremony was brief, but when Yates slipped his mother's gold band onto her finger, Eleanor felt a joy so intense it brought fresh tears to her eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the justice declared. Mr. Irving, you may kiss your bride. Yates cupped Eleanor's face in his hands as if she were made of the finest porcelain and kissed her with such tenderness that she forgot the existence of anyone else in the room. When they parted, his smile was brighter than the winter sun outside. Mrs. Irving, he murmured, the new name sounding right on his lips. Shall we go home? As they left the justice's office, they encountered several townspeople on the street, including Meredith Crawley, who stared openly at Eleanor's hand resting on Yates's arm. Good afternoon, Yates said pleasantly, tipping his hat. Allow me to introduce my wife, Eleanor Irving. The shock on Meredith's face was almost worth the pain she had caused with her rumors. Wife, she sputtered. But when? Just now, Eleanor replied, unable to keep a small, satisfied smile from her lips. We didn't see the need to wait. I'm sure the good people of Aspen will join us in celebration, Yates added, his tone making it clear that any who didn't would answer to him. They continued down the street to where Luke waited with the wagon, leaving a cluster of stunned townsfolk in their wake. That was wicked of us, Eleanor whispered, though she couldn't stop smiling. They deserved it, Yates replied, helping her into the wagon. Besides, I wanted everyone to know that the most remarkable woman in Aspen is now my wife. The journey back to the ranch to their home was filled with a happiness Eleanor had never expected to feel again. Snow began to fall once more, soft flakes that caught in Yates's hair and on Eleanor's eyelashes, but neither minded the cold. They were too wrapped in the warmth of newfound love. As the wagon crested the hill revealing the ranch below, Yates pulled Eleanor closer against his side. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irving." The winter passed in a blur of blissful days and passionate nights. Eleanor transformed the ranch house into a true home, filling it with warmth and comfort that even the most brutal Colorado weather couldn't diminish. Yates proved to be a devoted husband, his tenderness in private matched only by his public pride in introducing Eleanor as his wife whenever they ventured into town. Gradually, the rumors faded. It became clear to even the most determined gossips that the Irvings' marriage was one of genuine affection rather than hasty necessity. When spring arrived, bringing new calves and foals to the ranch, Eleanor found unexpected joy in helping Yates with the animals. She discovered she had a way with the young creatures, particularly the orphaned ones that required bottle feeding. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of pink and gold, Yates took her hand in his. "Are you happy, Eleanor?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "You've given me everything I could want." He seemed to hesitate before speaking again. "I've been thinking about something. The Wilkerson baby." Eleanor knew the story. Martha Wilkerson had died in childbirth the previous month, leaving her husband Tom with 5 children, including the newborn. Tom was struggling to care for his family while running his small farm. "What about them?" she asked, though she had an inkling of where Yates was leading. "Tom came to see me yesterday. He's selling the farm, moving back east to his parents, says he can't manage the baby along with everything else." Yates squeezed her hand. "He asked if we might consider taking the little one." Eleanor's heart seemed to stop. "Taking? You mean adopting the baby?" Yates nodded. "I told him I needed to speak with you first. It's a big decision." "A baby," Eleanor whispered, hardly daring to hope. "Our baby, if you want," Yates said softly. "I thought perhaps. Well, I know how much you love children, even though you've tried not to show it. I see how you are with the foals and calves. You wouldn't mind raising another man's child." "She wouldn't be another man's child. She'd be ours." He brought her hand to his lips. "I meant what I said on the day we married, Eleanor. You are plenty for me. But if you want this, if it would make you happy, then I want it too." Tears of joy spilled down Eleanor's cheeks as she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes. Oh, Yates, yes." 2 days later, they brought home Sarah Wilkerson, now Sarah Irving, a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair and eyes the color of summer storms. Eleanor had feared she might not know how to be a mother, but as soon as the infant was placed in her arms, instinct took over. She knew how to hold her, how to soothe her cries, how to nourish her with love as well as milk. Yates proved to be a natural father, spending hours walking the floor with Sarah when she was colicky, singing old cavalry songs that somehow calmed her better than any lullaby. The ranch hands doted on the baby as well, bringing her small gifts and volunteering to watch her when Eleanor needed a rest. Summer came to the mountains, bringing lush green to the pastures and wildflowers to the meadows. Eleanor celebrated her 31st birthday with a small party attended by Olivia, Rosa, and Miguel, and the other ranch hands. As she blew out the candles on the cake Rosa had baked, she made a silent wish of gratitude for the life she now had. Later that night, after Sarah was sleeping peacefully in the cradle Yates had crafted, he presented Eleanor with a small wooden box. "Happy birthday," he said, watching nervously as she opened it. Inside lay a beautiful silver locket. When Eleanor opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Yates on one side and Sarah on the other. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears threatening again. She seemed to cry so easily these days, but always from happiness. "Help me put it on." As Yates fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers lingered on her skin. "I have something to tell you," he murmured. I got a letter today from a family in Denver. They have twin boys they can't care for, their mother is ill, and the father works long hours at the railroad. Eleanor turned to face him, her eyes wide. Twins, 3 years old, healthy but a handful according to their father. Yates took her hands in his. I told him we'd need to discuss it, but what do you think? 2 more children. Eleanor could hardly believe what she was hearing. Yates, are you sure? 3 children is a lot of responsibility. I've never been more sure of anything, he said firmly. This ranch needs children, Eleanor. It needs laughter and noise and the kind of love only you know how to give. Eleanor thought of the empty upstairs bedrooms, how perfect they would be for growing boys. She thought of Sarah having brothers to play with as she grew older. She thought of the family she had never dared to dream of having. Yes, she said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Let's bring them home. The twins Joseph and James arrived a week later, 2 identical bundles of energy with copper-colored hair and mischievous grins. They were shy at first, clinging to each other in the face of so many strangers, but Eleanor's patient kindness soon won them over. Within days, they were running freely about the ranch, shadowing the ranch hands and begging Yates for rides on his horse. Autumn brought the harvest and preparations for another Colorado winter. Eleanor found herself busier than ever, managing the house and 3 children, yet she had never been happier. She still sewed, creating warm clothes for her growing family and curtains for the boys' bedroom, but now she did it out of love rather than necessity. One crisp October day, almost exactly a year after she had first met Yates, Eleanor was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Reverend Thompson driving toward the house, his wife beside him. Mrs. Irving, the Reverend called as he pulled the horses to a stop. Good day to you. Reverend Mrs. Thompson, Eleanor replied cautiously. Her relationship with the church had remained strained since her departure from Aspen. What brings you out this way? We heard about your growing family, Mrs. Thompson said, her tone warmer than Eleanor remembered. We've brought some things the church ladies thought might be useful. To Eleanor's astonishment, the wagon was filled with children's clothes, toys, books, and even a rocking horse. This is very generous, she managed, still uncertain of their motives. The church has missed your voice in the choir, Reverend Thompson said, looking somewhat ashamed. Well, we misjudged you, Mrs. Irving. I've come to apologize and to ask if you might consider returning to the congregation. Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened and Yates emerged with Sarah in his arms. The twins tumbled out behind him, racing toward Eleanor with excited shouts. Mama! Mama! Papa says we can help with the new foal, Joseph, or was it James, exclaimed, grabbing her skirts. Only if you're very quiet and gentle, she reminded him, smoothing his unruly hair. Mrs. Thompson watched the scene with a softened expression. You have a beautiful family, Eleanor. Yes, Eleanor agreed, looking at her children and the husband who had made it all possible. I do. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Yates sat on the porch as had become their custom. The air was growing colder, but wrapped in a quilt in each other's arms, they were perfectly warm. The Reverend's visit surprised me, Eleanor admitted. I never thought they'd apologize. People can change, Yates said, pressing a kiss to her temple, especially when confronted with evidence of their mistakes. And what evidence is that? Your happiness, your family. He turned her face toward his. You're glowing with it, Eleanor. Anyone can see that this is exactly where you're meant to be, she smiled, leaning into his embrace. It is, though I never would have found my way here if not for you. I think we found each other, he corrected gently. 2 incomplete halves that make a perfect whole. As they sat in comfortable silence watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a childless widow mocked by her community to a wife and mother of three, beloved by her husband and respected by those who had once scorned her. Yates had been right all those months ago. She was plenty, more than enough, and in his love she had found the family she had always longed for. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, noticing her contemplative mood. "The future," she replied, nestling closer to him. "Our future, and how grateful I am that you saw me when no one else did." "I'll always see you," he promised, sealing his words with a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion of their first. Always. 2 years later, Eleanor stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as Yates taught 5-year-old Joseph and James how to ride their first ponies. Sarah, now 3, sat perched on the corral fence, clapping her hands and shouting encouragement to her brothers. Beside Eleanor, cradled in her arms, slept Elizabeth Irving, the miracle baby born just 3 months earlier, the child the doctors had said Eleanor could never conceive. The ranch had prospered under Yates's careful management, growing to become one of the most successful operations in the county. The original house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, with a new wing added the previous summer. Eleanor had started a small school for the ranch children and those from neighboring properties, using her love of reading to inspire a new generation. Aspen had changed too. The railroad had finally reached the town, bringing new people and new opportunities. Many of those who had once whispered behind Eleanor's back now sought her friendship, impressed by her husband's success and her own accomplishments. Even Meredith Crawley had been forced to acknowledge that she had misjudged the woman she had once mocked as barren and worthless. But the greatest change was in Eleanor herself. The timid widow who had once scurried through town with downcast eyes now stood tall and confident. She had found her voice not just in the church choir, which had welcomed her back with open arms, but in the community as well. She served on committees, organized charitable efforts, and spoke her mind without fear of judgment. "Mama, did you see?" James called, his pony trotting in a small circle under Yates's watchful eye. "I'm riding by myself. I see you, darling," she called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Yates looked up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still as bright and genuine as the day they met, warmed her from the inside out. He said something to the boys, then crossed to where she stood, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on Elizabeth's downy head before capturing Eleanor's lips with his own. "Happy?" he asked, the question that had become a ritual between them. "Completely," she answered, the truth of it evident in her shining eyes. "And you, more than I ever dreamed possible." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her and their sleeping daughter close against his side. Together, they watched their sons circle the corral on their ponies, Sarah cheering them on, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the ranch they had built together. Eleanor thought about the words Yates had spoken to her that day in her tiny rented room, when her world had seemed to be falling apart. "You are plenty for me," he had said. She hadn't fully believed him then, couldn't imagine how he could want her when she had nothing to offer but herself. Now she understood. Love wasn't about what you could give or what you lacked. It was about seeing the whole person, flaws and strengths alike, and choosing them every day. Yates had seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. He had chosen her when she thought herself unworthy of being chosen. And in doing so, he had given her everything she had ever wanted: a home, a family, a purpose. But most importantly, he had given her the courage to see herself as he saw her. Not as the barren woman mocked by the town, but as Eleanor Irving, wife, mother, teacher, friend. A woman who was, indeed, plenty.